This is Making Better Decisions. I'm your host, Ryan Sullivan. Decisions are where rubber meets the road for organizations. Each week, we'll be learning from people who are on the front lines of turning raw data into better outcomes for their organizations. This show is sponsored by Canopy Analytic, helping companies make better decisions using data. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Making Better Decisions podcast. Today's guest has an MBA from Carnegie Mellon and his PhD in data mining, machine learning, and predictive modeling from Temple. He has 20 years of experience in the analytics and data science industries, worked for companies like Travelers, Aetna, Stanley Black& Decker, and HelloFresh. He's currently a senior consulting partner for Sigmoid and a founder of his company, AI&DA Insights. Please welcome to the show, Aleks Lazarevic. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you, Ryan. It's my pleasure to be here and I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, me too. I'm super excited. What is one thing you wish more people knew about using data to make better decisions?
That's a good one. So I think the real magic in using data effectively is really to know what kind of the business questions you are trying to answer. And data without that kind of the context is just a noise. And even the famous American economist, management consultant, statistician, he has many roles. Actually, Edward Deming, he said, actually, at one point, he said, if you do not know how to answer the right questions, you discover nothing. And he was the main guy who was in behind the success of Japanese economy after the Second World War, and also behind the Ford success in 80s. And I think this is really the key, in my opinion. If you start asking the right questions, you will try to figure out what data you need. And when I say data, you don't need to actually just focus or limit yourself just on that internal data within your organization. This internal data will give you only partial view of what's happening. You can go beyond that. You can focus on many different external data sources, which would include public data sets, marketing trends, third-party vendor data. And this will give you different kind of fresh insights, help you navigate through certain things. Um, I think the best possible way, in my opinion, is actually to combine internal data you have with external data to get the best possible view of what's happening. One of the classical examples when internal data is not sufficient is when you're trying to work on the problem of demand forecasting during the COVID. Traditionally, in demand forecasting problems, you typically use internal data like previous sales, inventory, production capacity, even promotions. However, during the COVID, none of this really helped. And you had to actually start using other indicators, COVID numbers, economical indicators, market trends, even the weather patterns to see what's happening in order to figure out what that kind of demand from people would be and to help you make better decisions.
And I think all of that stems back to your initial point, which is what is the underlying business question? We talk a lot on the podcast about this concept and about how data and all the technology that we use to interact with it are just tools to help us achieve business objectives. So if those business objectives aren't clear, it's, a little bit like building a house with no blueprint. Like you might end up with something, but was it what you wanted? Who knows?
Yeah,
So one of the things that would be interesting to hear your perspective on is if we're talking about an organization that, some member hears what we're talking about right now and is like, "Oh, wow, we actually haven't thought about that." How can they go about ensuring that they've made the right blueprint? How can they go about making sure that they build the right business questions in order to answer them with data?
that's a great question. And I think everything starts with, in addition to asking the right business questions, everything starts with, okay, what's the business objective? What's kind of what you would like to achieve? For example, if you're talking about retention, one thing that you would like to achieve, not only to understand who are the people who are canceling the contracts with your company, but also how you want to prevent that. So if you try to understand what is the business objective, in addition to asking these kind of questions, that would be the most efficient way to try to address this. And of course, you always ask these kind of five why questions. Why is this happening? What they want to achieve? All of these kind of questions, and this will help you identify the right data sources. However, uh, even if you understand what are the right business questions, even if you understand what kind of data you want to use, there are many more kind of criteria that you need to consider before you start implementing any of this. First, you need to understand what is potential impact of the value coming out of all of these potential use cases. The second one is you're trying to understand what kind of data you already have and what kind of impact you can make with the data you already have and with technology you already have. The third one is what is the technical complexity of these kind of solutions. You're ideally looking for some relatively quick uh, wins that would actually be able to show quick ROI to also help you build that kind of credibility as an analytics leader, build that credibility, build that kind of trust among the organization that actually making decisions with data is actually the most effective way to look at the business decisions. And from there, you can actually start working on more strategic programs that will actually combine many different kind of aspects of the business, different kind of methodologies, different departments. So that's, in my opinion, the right way to start actually working on or prioritizing analytics use cases, starting from small, creating quick wins, building credibility, reputation, and then going from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that's particularly interesting about getting to talk to you is you have both education and experience on what I'll call kind of both sides of the wall as far as, centralized analytics, right? Like the MBA is very much kind of like business user, consumer, business leader side of things. And then you would have what I argue is a very high degree of education and credibility on the very technical side of things. And I do think that it is, it's no surprise that someone like you would find themselves in analytics because we generally are the bridge between the very technical and the very business focused and trying to use those technologies to try to achieve better business outcomes. Talk to me a little bit about what has been successful for you and then also what has been difficult for you in bridging those two worlds.
That's actually the key behind the success of every analytics organization, in my opinion, bridging that gap successful. And it took me some time to actually figure out because many organizations traditionally, like maybe 10 years ago or more, were starting to actually hire PhDs like me and actually people who are mostly technical to work on the most advanced machine learning problems. However, they didn't work because these people typically didn't understand the business. And then people were trying to find
Mm.
these kind of unicorns who will know not only the technical aspects, but also the business aspects and everything. And these people are extremely rare to find. So that's why the kind of the concept of product manager, analytics product manager, or some people call analytics translator started to appear because these are the people who would try to actually bridge that gap. People who understand technology from the high level, understand when certain technique or how actually should ask business questions, what kind of the analytical solution we need to build rather than actually code and do everything, but also they understand business very well. And I think this was relatively new role, like approximately like 10 years ago or more. And people actually started to invest more and more in that. And I think this is one, if you don't have these unicorns, then probably having a person who is dedicated to be a product manager who will need to understand what kind of the business questions need to be asked, what kind of analytical solution we need to build, what kind of data we have available. So that person needs to be knowledgeable from technology perspective to the level that they need to understand the opportunity and need to understand what technical team could do, but also they need to understand what potential impact and the value this analytical solution will bring to the organization. So these people are extremely crucial and important for the overall success of the analytics organization and anything you do with analytics. I believe according to some survey that was done maybe like 5 to 7 years ago, I don't remember exact date, but around 80 to 90% of analytics projects were failing. And one of the biggest reason were building the data-driven culture and having lack of that engagement and commitment. If you don't have that engagement and commitment on the business side, if they are not completely into the project, they're working with the technical team, that project will likely fail. Because analytics, data science, machine learning is not just IT when you give requirements and people work on themselves. It's a iterative thing. It's actually the team sport as well. You need to have all the players together in order to make this as a success.
Wow. There's a lot there.
I mean, yeah, years of pain and experience.
Yeah, usually the second comes from the first in my experience. One of the things that struck me from the last thing you were mentioning is this idea of buy-in and the organization from leadership to line level agreeing, okay, we are going to materially differentiate ourselves from our competition, from the rest of the market by putting a heavy focus on being data driven, using the all of the information that's available to us to make the best decisions possible. It strikes me that not every company can be good at that. And lots of times when I have conversations like this, it's almost a foregone conclusion in the discussion that everybody is going to try to be that way, that it is just objectively the best way and that everybody is going to do it. And if we think about business from a perspective other than data, right? Like take, financial numbers. So there are lots of businesses that do a really phenomenal job at the low end of the pricing spectrum for a given good or service. And then there are other companies that do well at the very high end and a couple that do well in the middle. So businesses have the opportunity to make decisions. Okay, are we going to go value and volume? Are we going to go premium? Are we going to do something different? Tell me a little bit about your thoughts. Should every organization be data forward?
Ideally, they should. However, to your point, not every organization is equally prepared to do that. I think I have like several types of the companies. I typically consider like you have a digitally native companies like Amazon, Google, Microsoft. They are companies that actually use the data on a daily basis, really, and actually their whole business depends on the data, right? Then you had companies that traditionally were using the data for certain things. For example, financial and insurance companies were typically using data to build premium models, the old generalized linear models to determine what kind of premium you should pay, what kind of the loan default. They are kind of old models, statistical models, and they had certain amount of data that they were using on a regular basis. And then you have everyone else, really, where they collected the data mostly for from the IT perspective, just maybe from the legal perspective, they need to collect some data to actually just have it there. And these companies will struggle the most because they didn't build this kind of proper data infrastructure. They didn't build this kind of proper data management, data governance, and they didn't focus on the data quality. Uh, and being able to focus on this data quality, trying to figure out basically that everything you do needs to be meaningful and actually your results should make sense is the key. For the companies like Google, Amazon, Facebook, this is coming more naturally because they were using this often. For companies, typical CPG companies, healthcare company, even pharma companies, it takes a little bit more effort to actually define these things. And I think one of the kind of things when you start actually prioritizing some of these things, I mentioned prioritization of the use cases earlier to focus on the quick wins. Here, basically, you actually try to combine this with the data. You want to actually make sure that you start your analytics journey with combining what data you have available, what is the good quality of data with something you can do. That's the only way you actually can show the value out of this. You probably heard for the fact that many chief data officers fail within the first 2 years. And why is that? Because chief data officers typically focus on data; they don't focus on value. And if you're not able to tie the value of your data to the value of analytics projects, you will fail because no one will have patience to let you sit in your basement and fix your data for the next 2 or 3 years. You have to show the value in your journey. And I think that's the key. Basically. Even if you have really limited data, you have to start with what you have, what is the good quality, and start building around that. And then along that way, you actually have to build the overall data infrastructure, data platform, data governance, data management framework, focus on the data quality and all other things. So this is, in my opinion, the right way to actually address, this kind of the challenge, how to actually avoid these kind of the data traps, and actually how you can make a progress in your analytics journey.
Yeah, I love that answer. I was leading the witness a little bit. Obviously, in my line of work, I think that using data to make one more decision than you would have made otherwise is a good thing. How much you invest and over what time period you make that investment, I think should be very bespoke to the organization, should be a part of a long-term plan, and should recognize where that organization is on the data and analytics kind of maturity model.
True. And there is organization that is the same. Every organization needs a slightly different journey. And regardless of this kind of maturity that I mentioned earlier, these kind of three different type of companies, I still actually see data quality challenges in any company that I work with, honestly, regardless how digital native that company is. And focusing on data quality is one of the right things to do as well.
One of the things that you've brought up twice now is this idea of when undertaking a look at an organization's data strategy or undertaking some large data project, a new person in a role, I very much agree with you. And we make these recommendations frequently to our clients around, okay, what can you do right now that can help the organization? Undoubtedly, there is some non zero amount of short term value that can be delivered to the business. Prioritizing that is good for everybody. However, it strikes me that there are also many organizations that fall into the trap of focusing only on those short term wins and what we can manage really well right now. And I wonder if you have recommendations for an organization where there is huge untapped value in doing something larger or bigger. How can they address those things? How can they kind of curry the buy-in that's necessary to make a 1 to 5 year investment in differentiating themselves from the rest of the market by being able to understand some harder problems?
Actually, it depends. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, tying initial value to these quick wins is the key because this help you build this kind of reputation. However, some companies may be stuck in this kind of quick wins. And I think one approach that companies could try is really in that journey, by focusing initially on quick wins. You don't want to focus on quick wins that would just mean like another dashboard, another data visualization report. You want to actually show the power of advanced analytics in these kind of quick wins. That will not mean just creating a dashboard. It would mean just applying analytics. For example, I was mentioning retention problem earlier. And one kind of approach for the quick win in retention it would be just to understand actually who are the customers who are leaving. And you will create a dashboard that can monitor all this information. However, if you just put an extra effort and try to actually convince the business partner that actually there is something more that can be done, instead of looking historically what has been done, can we actually predict what are the customers that are most likely to cancel our contract? And actually, can we actually proactively reach out to them and try to work on these issues? We will actually avoid the cancellation. We will actually uh, reduce the cancellation rate proactively, and we will be able to show the value instead of just understanding what's happening. So I think in that journey from actually shifting from these quick wins to these kind of more strategic programs, you want to actually try to demonstrate the power of analytics, data science, machine learning, and AI, and actually show the value behind that. And actually, that's where people will start believing there is a value behind that. And actually, this will help you actually start talking to business partner how actually you will earn the seat at the table, actually. and you will start working together with them how to actually uh, try to address those untapped opportunities that you were mentioning earlier, and try to create kind of more strategic programs. But the only way to do that is to actually build that kind of credibility trust, not just through building the dashboard, but also helping business shift to this from this reactive way of thinking to proactive way of thinking, how to proactively address certain things. And that's the only way to do through advanced analytics, which would include machine learning, AI, and stuff like that.
I'm glad that you broached the topic. Having such deep background in more advanced analytics, I'm interested to get your take on a topic that we've discussed here a couple times. So, on the one end of the spectrum, we have the most basic of the basic. I have a clean table of information. I make a bar chart or some dashboard or whatever that's basically just adding and dividing. Typical business intelligence. We then have at the total other end of the spectrum, very, very complicated, thousands of layers, millions of nodes type neural net with, transformers and convolutions, all the very, very advanced machine learning artificial techniques, typically in the form of like an LLM. Right now, that's what's captured the public's imagination. So we have people talking about the extremes, right? We have basic reporting and BI, and then we have this unbelievably complicated AI. One of the things that I love to get people's input on is how about the middle? We have all of these things like much less complicated machine learning. We have basic regression, simple forecasting ideas. So instead of talking exclusively about the past, we get to talk a little bit about the future. With someone that has such a breadth of experience, such as yourself, I want to get your advice on how organizations can make use of that massive tool set in the middle.
To your point, you mentioned you have this kind of basic kind of uh, BI on one side, and on another side you have this kind of advanced analytics, mostly through AI and generative AI. And I think, however, very often the value lies in the middle. And prior to generative AI emergence, which was around 2 years ago, approximately, many people actually had a problem, or not a problem, but actually they were reluctant to work with analytics organization to create the value because they didn't understand what analytics is. And it was really hard to convince people to trust you to actually do any work with you. You had to really had hard time to convince them. After emergence of generative AI, especially GPT, it took like maybe people to like a several like a 6 to 9 months to actually explore what this is. And this was the first time they had the opportunity to actually interact with AI and understand it can produce something meaningful. And right now you have almost opposite problem when people want to do everything with generative AI, although this may not be the case. And that brings us to the point that most of these cases are still in the middle. And their major kind of thing that you have to do as a part of an analytics organization or someone who is working very closely with the business stakeholders is to kind of curb the enthusiasm of the people who wants to apply generative AI. Because not everything is generative AI. Sometimes is a combination of generative AI with something else. Sometimes it's combination of generative AI with simple dashboard. Sometimes it's not even generative AI at all, but they think generative AI could help. So you really need to do the proper kind of informing people, education, what generative AI really is, and help them understand, how without actually spending too much resources, both computational and people, how you can achieve the same results even if you apply actually some really advanced techniques. And I think in order to do that, one of the key aspects is building that kind of data-driven culture, building this kind of AI literacy, helping people understand what are the possibilities of, applying this technology. One of the few things that we did with few of our clients is we organized the AI day when we actually help people to actually get their hands on the tools like a custom GPT, playing with the tool themselves and understand what are the kind of challenges when they actually try to do this in the business. And actually that opened a lot of eyes, open eyes. Okay. Oh, I can do that. Oh, I have some restrictions here, limitations. I have to be more careful. So giving the people opportunities to actually play with some of these tools is really key for them to better understand what could be possible and where they need to actually shift their focus to something a little bit in the middle to achieve their business outcomes.
Yeah, I love that answer. One of the things, again, pulling from your experience that I'd be interested to get your take on is your career has spanned quite a few different industries. And it strikes me that some of those industries are fundamentally different from one another. You've been involved in, kind of good provision as a service with HelloFresh. You have been involved in actual goods manufacture and sale with Stanley Black& and Decker, insurance, all these things. So one of the things that would be cool to get your take on is how does data and analytics and AI, how do all of these things change depending on the business type?
That's a loaded question, and I'll try to answer. But
Sure.
the concept, I mean, methodology, technology always remain the same, and you always try to make some analogies. For example, when you're in manufacturing, fall detection, diagnostics, prognostics, even predictive maintenance is related to kind of type of the anomaly detection, building the supervised model for detecting these kind of rare events. This is where technology is. When I was at Aetna, when we were doing healthcare fraud, waste, and abuse detection, we kind of use the same methodology. And I think it's always important, regardless of the industry in which you're working in, it's always important to understand to my first point that I made today, what is the business objective you want to do? What is really what trying to accomplish? And then you work your way backwards from the business problem. You work your backwards. What kind of is the right technology? What is the right analytical solution you want to make? If you are familiar with all possible analytical solution and all potential business applications, it would not be hard for you, even if you work in completely different industry, to recognize where certain methodology should be applicable for particular business problem. But again, if you are not familiar with particular business or industry, it's the key for you to learn this immediately because you want to understand what are the business questions, what people care about, what they want to achieve. And I think that's what I try to do early in every job that I started in completely new industry. My first imperative was actually to try to learn the business, what kind of the business questions they would like to ask, what kind of the business answers we need to provide, and what kind of the business outcomes we need to have. And from there, you go, what kind of data we need to find, what is the right analytical solution, and so on and so on. I think that would be my answer. There are really no magical kind of touch that you need to have, but trying to understand the business and work your way backwards toward the methodology and technology you need to use.
Yeah.
Steve Jobs said at one time that you always have to start from the business question, business problem, and work your backwards toward technology.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Which is not the case today because right now, especially with generative AI, you have a lot of people who actually just want to build another shiny tool. And that will not create any value. That will, may create few wows in some of the meetings, but it will not create the value for the company.
Yeah. A lot of hammers in search of nails.
Yeah. Yes. And you may create some value, but if you want to create the ROI with especially high cost of applying these models, that will be a little bit more challenging.
Being a consultant, I've had uh similar experience to you. Obviously, you have consulting experience and also having worked in a lot of different areas. My personal take is you talked about this pathway like, all right, we have the business question, and then we have to work that backwards into a technical solution. Lots of times you just get to focus on the technical solution. And at that layer, you're right. Like technology is technology. Do you know how to code? Do you know databases? Do you know the computing concepts? Do you know all that stuff? It's all the same. And it can be really easy to just be like, yeah, data problems are data problems. All data is the same. No big deal. We got this.
So, however, you cannot forget that when you go backwards to your data technical solution, you cannot forget that you have to interact with the business.
Exactly.
It's iterative. You cannot just go there, lock yourself, and do your problem. You have to interact with the business to make sure that what you're building is what they need.
Absolutely. And many times over this conversation, we've harkened back to this idea of understanding the business's problems is critical to building anything of value technically. And so I think that is the place where things differ, right? Different organizations and different types of organizations, the frequency of particular problems changes a lot. The technical solutions under the hood, as you mentioned, right? Like these are just technical approaches. But if I don't understand fundamentally the business that I'm building for, the industry that it is within, the language that people use, what those metrics actually mean, then I'm kind of going to be rudderless. And that to me is like the industry specific stuff that I've picked up over the years where now when I go into certain types of clients and it's like, "Hey, I have 5 years of experience working in your industry," it makes those projects go much faster and the ROI is drastically higher.
True, 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 true. I think that's a very good point, and I think that's also where entire data science profession is going through some kind of transformation, especially with the generative AI tools that help people code much easier and actually even to build the code for them. The focus on the data science organization, organization would be more focused on understanding the business rather than technology aspects. You still need to know basically, basically what is the right analytical solution to convert that business problem into right analytical solution. But coding, technology, actually writing the code would be less and less important in my opinion because you will have more tools to help you from that perspective. And I think this is actually uh, bringing that technology to the business people to be able to actually immediately answer some of the questions. I'm not saying the data science profession will disappear, but it would evolve to something different. You still need some kind of the knowledge, especially from the future generation and stuff like that. That you still need some kind of the common knowledge between the business and the technology to be able to actually recognize what you need to do. I mean, I was amazed. Like a few months ago, I tried a tool that was able to actually do all the data pre-processing, all the feature generation that I specify I want to do, build predictive model, run predictive model, get the evaluation and everything. I said, okay, everything I learned in my life could be done in 2 hours right now.
Yeah.
We need to actually evolve. We need to actually adapt this new technology and grow with this. Because if it just, remain where we are, we'll be stuck.
I think this is something that's been talked a lot by, kinda general technologists. As a given technology or type of technology becomes more mature, it also becomes more invisible. When nobody had electricity, in order to make your house somehow have electricity required a lot of know-how.
Yes.
Now, I would argue an obscenely small percentage of the people who use electricity understand electricity well enough to say, "I'm going to wire my house and make it," so as these technologies get more and more and more mature and there are more good and service provisioners that enter into that equation, the deep technical expertise that is required gets less and less. Now, whether this is a good thing or a bad thing for our long-term future, this is yet to be seen, especially with things like artificial intelligence. But I I couldn't agree with you more that, you know, take for example what I will call kind of modern BI tools. So having these tools which are approachable by citizen developers, read some more invisible, um, and have larger data capacity and compression, like all of these things, right? So, Power BI, Tableau, all these kind of like new BI tools that came out. I had the opportunity and the luck to get started in that space right as it was beginning. And I, you know, had the amazing opportunity and luck to kind of ride that wave as it's gone out and become more mature. We're now starting to get to a place where a lot of the maturity of these tools and the adoption of these tools has made it so that they are much less difficult to adopt and to get good results out of. And so it behooves me as a consultant and technologist and business owner to start thinking about, okay, I need to start moving to new questions. These questions have been sufficiently answered by the market. What's the next set of questions that I can become an expert in and can hand that expertise off to others?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think this kind of creativity that you're kind of hinting is the key that will actually distinguish us from AI. AI is good at answering the questions, but it's not, in my opinion, yet good at asking the right questions. So I think that's basically where we need to excel. We have all the help we want to answer the questions, but we need to excel at what kind of questions we need to ask. And that's actually where we need to be really great in order to distinguish ourselves. Because if your only job is to do what you're asked to do, then AI can do pretty, I mean, I'm pretty sure AI can do like 90% of that. We need to start asking the right questions. And actually, that's how we should distinguish ourselves. And actually, that's what basically will make a human race actually progress in the future as well.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I think is particularly interesting on that front, I think you hit the nail on the head as of right now. Our kind of key differentiator is in being able to muse on the why. Like, why should we do that? Maybe what is the right next step as opposed to the how, right? Generative AI already does a pretty decent job at how. One of the other things that I'm struck by is, whether it is hallucination or it is bad training data or it is, insert problem here. One of the things that I do find amusing is I'll give you an example. So one of the primary uses that I currently have for generative AI is it has allowed me to branch into technologies which are fairly close to things that I've spent a lot of time building expertise in, but are different enough that I can't do them as intuitively. So, take database technologies, for example. For people who don't know that are listeners out there, every single database kind of has its own idiosyncrasies, its own slightly different dialect of how you write code to interact with it, and all that stuff. The computing concepts in general are the same, right? Like how tables get stored fall into a couple standard categories, how the compute and the logic and all that stuff happens, they follow a standard set of concepts that once you understand those deeply and meaningfully, I really understand all of the database and data storage technologies that are out there, but I may not know where the commas go or this one has this limitation, this one doesn't, stuff like that. So, what it's really allowed me to do is say, okay, well, even though my business is primarily focused on Microsoft technology, and that's the stuff that I've spent my career building up a high degree of familiarity and experience with. I can now say yes when someone has a project that's kind of mostly in my wheelhouse, but there's one technology that isn't. It's like, hey, no problem. I already understand all the concepts. I can just apply it to this other technology.
Couldn't agree more. That's true.
Yeah. One of the things that has been, amusing to me is how frequently I type in, I'm like, "Hey, I'm trying to do this in this database technology," I give it some background information and it spits out an answer which is objectively false. Like, it's like, "You can't do this in that technology." And I'm like, "Yeah, you can." And so I go and I look it up and all that stuff. One of the things that as we have this conversation about differentiating ourselves from the machines is having that check on accuracy and correctness and how many times I interact with it and I have to like I give it a prompt and I get 3, 4, 5 answers back that are objectively false and I give it information telling that it's false and it's like, "Oh, you're absolutely right. Here's a better answer." So I do wonder as this tool gets more and more adopted and more invisible, how will we as a society ensure that it's correct and it doesn't turn into an echo chamber of robots yelling incorrect information at one another like we see on LinkedIn?
Yeah, that's a tough question, which I'm not sure if I have the right answer, but I
Sure.
think proper evaluation, focusing on not necessarily just on correctness and actually this kind of the data bias and responsible AI. I think these are kind of things that we need to take seriously right now. This is considered more like security. This is something is nice to have, but it's not required. And people take this with not the primary priority, but maybe secondary priority. Know what I mean? They want to focus first to demonstrate certain things rather than actually make sure that the outputs are correct. But you're absolutely right. In order to actually build that kind of the trust in these tools, you need to make sure that you can trust them all the time. Not all the time, but like a 99.9% of the time, because I don't think that no one, even all the tools we have are correct 100% of the time. But you need to actually have some kind of the degree of correctness on them to have this the proper accuracy. And the only way I can see that is to constant evaluation, constant monitoring, even not only during the building phase and the testing period, but also during actually when you scale up certain solutions, you need to monitor all possible scenarios, all possible cases when this can go wrong and actually constantly update your model. This is the only way I can see that we can go somewhere that we can build this kind of the kind of false proof the algorithms and the tools that we can use on a daily basis. I'm not sure, that's would be easy. How long it will take? Honestly, that's I don't know that if anyone knows this answer, but it will take some time actually for us to actually start completely trust these tools. Right now, we can trust these tools for everything that is relatively subjective, right? Certain things, write the content. However, whenever we go to something really specific, do data analysis, for example, you always have to, check the results just to make sure that you get what you need. And this is something that you need to actually start building your trust slowly, but also make sure through iterations that the tool does what is asked to do.
The same as anything else.
Yeah, true. And this is a tough journey. This is something that I don't think it's a focus of entire community right now. The focus is actually to build as many proof of concept to show the capabilities of these tools, not necessarily to show the correctness and accuracy of these tools. And I think this should slowly change as soon as the organizations start to put more tools like that into deployment. When they deploy more of these tools, they will start realizing all potential challenges and the problems and the inaccuracies, hallucinations they may have. But this will happen, gradually, I guess.
Alex, I could talk to you for the next 5 hours about this, and we could go off into the weeds on in nerd land, but I will save our listeners from that. Sure.
Yes, yes.
So I wanted to give our listeners the opportunity to learn a bit more about you. Tell us a bit about yourself outside of work and all these technical topics that we've gotten here from you today.
Uh, I'm a dad. I have two kids. I like to cook. My wish when I retire is to actually have a farm to table restaurant when actually all the fresh vegetables, fruits will be available for the customers, when they can choose what they want to do, even maybe walk in the garden and pick their own. And this is kind of the restaurant I would like to have. And that's something I would like to do when I retire.
I love it. Tell me a little bit. How'd you get into cooking? How'd you find your love there?
I found experimenting with food is similar to experimenting with data. Especially when you have to experiment with different kind of flavors and everything. The fact that I worked for HelloFresh helped because you were able to actually experiment with different kind of recipes and you learn a few tricks there. But the reason I like the cook because I have another passion of healthcare. I truly believe that the true health will come from the lifestyle and the food we eat. If you remember what Hippocrates said, let's food be the Thai medicine and let's medicine be the Thai food. I strongly believe in that statement. And I believe if we eat in the proper way, we should be able to maintain our health to be good. Unfortunately, in today's world, most of our healthcare is reactive. We react to things and we actually treat the problem rather than cure. And I believe food can actually help not only to prevent diseases, but also actually cure us in some way as well. So I honestly believe that combining this food with the proper healthcare should be the right way to go. And that's another reason I'm doing it, or I want to do that.
I absolutely love that. Being a data guy myself, the proliferation of all these kind of food and fitness tracking apps and all of that stuff, they kind of um, appeal to my data mentality. And so I I was gonna say obviously, but I guess it's not that obvious. I've built a dashboard looking at all of this stuff, like all of my exercise, my sleep, my food, all of this stuff. And one of the things that has made clear to me, as well as seeing a lot of modern research on these topics, is exactly what you said, right? These kind of traditional three pillars: food, sleep, exercise. I would expand each of them a little bit to say like what you put onto or into your body instead of just food. what you do, and then how you recover. But those 3 pillars are things that, are a lot of fun to hack. I will be honest, some of those things are easier said than done because the things that taste good aren't always the best for you. So I like cooking and eating a bit as well.
I'm glad you mentioned these two other pillars, exercise and sleep, because that restaurant should be somewhere in the nature that would allow you to sleep better, and of course, exercise or take a walk if you want.
Yeah. I also, love the family focus. Having 2 kids, there's a lot that goes into that, and I'm sure that that's a huge part of life as well.
We actually don't realize how quickly they grow and actually how much time we actually have with them. And actually, time really flies. And I'm trying to actually spend as much time as I can with them because I understand that actually they will grow pretty quick and actually they will go somewhere and live their own life.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't have kids yet, but I had an experience which I think is familiar to a lot of people. You grow up, and when you're really young, your family's all you have and your parents are your heroes. And then eventually you get to a certain stage where you're like, you guys aren't cool. Like, yeah, and like, so then you kind of are like, I got to get out of town and all this stuff. And then eventually, I hit, I'm just getting maybe into the middle of college or whatever. And you're like, hey, a home cooked meal with my parents and hanging out with my family, like, that sounds like about the coolest thing that I could do, and it's funny how you kinda come full circle, but it takes a bit of time for that to happen?
Yeah, this is growing up. This is growing up.
Yeah,
Kids go through different stages, and especially around the teenager age that you mentioned, this is basically where they try to figure out whether they are what they would like to do when they grow up, and actually how they distinguish them from the kids. And I think that's probably the toughest period for them.
yeah. Alex, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to come on, share your extremely broad and deep, which is very difficult, right? I think you may be one of those unicorns that you mentioned, where you kind of have very broad and deep technical understanding and can also apply that to the business. So thank you for taking an hour of your unicorn time to share with me and my listeners.
Thank you very much, Ryan. It was a pleasure talking to you about different topics, not just the data and analytics.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And for those listeners, thank you guys so much for listening, especially if you've made it this long. We really appreciate it. If you liked what you heard, please make sure to like, subscribe, tell a friend, give us a review, hopefully a good one. All of that stuff, it really matters and helps keep the podcast going. We really appreciate it. Alex, thank you again so much for coming on. This has been another exciting episode of the Making Better Decisions podcast. Have a good one. That's a wrap for today's episode of Making Better Decisions. For show notes and more, visit makingbetterdecisions.live. A special thank you to our sponsor, Canopy Analytic. Canopy Analytic is a boutique consultancy focused on business intelligence and data engineering. They help companies make better decisions using data. For more information, visit canopyanalytic.com. There's a better way. Let's find it together and make better decisions. Thank you so much for listening. We'll catch you next week. Peace.